All right, my friends, welcome to session 7 here in How to Read the Bible. Last session, we looked at the first process of just committing to being a good exegete, an exegeter of the scriptures. That's the idea of we're trying to figure out what the text meant to the original audience. Now, in this step, in the process, we need to actually measure the width of the river that we have to cross into the biblical world. Now you're like, what in the world does that mean? Well, think of it this way. We come to a river every time we come to our scriptures. And the width of the river from the distance between us and the original audience is quite far. It's a river that we have to cross. So we have to start to understand what are the differences between the biblical audience and us. That's the width of the river that we need to measure. We just need to understand. And you know it. If you've ever even picked up the Bible, you've read a book, maybe a more difficult book like Leviticus, or one of the Old Testament major prophets like Ezekiel, or maybe you've gone into a book like Revelation in the New Testament, and you start to read it and you're like, what in the world is this? How is this God speaking to me? What you've just encountered is a very wide river between us and the original audience of the text. And so we just need to say, come right out and say it. Yes, the Bible is so applicable and so needed, and it can speak to every nook and cranny and situation of your life, but it can be difficult. It can be confusing. It's not meant to be confusing, but it can be confusing. Why? Because there's differences in culture, language, situation, time, even the book that you read in the Bible, where it's placed. Is it in the Old Testament, under the Old Covenant, or is it in the New Testament, under the New Covenant? So this river, the width of the river, hinders us from understanding and applying the scriptures. And oftentimes we see how wide that river is. We say, forget it. I'm not going to do it. But friends, don't give up so quickly. It is also helpful to realize that sometimes the river is wider and narrower depending on the book. So if you go to a book like Leviticus in the Old Testament, it's all these moral laws and prescriptions for Old Testament Israel. That's hard. The river is wide, but then you go to a book like Philippians in the New Testament, and it's warm and pastoral and very applicable, and it's easier to understand. So the river is different depending on which book that you come across. So how do we measure that river? How do we think more about that river? How do you actually get across that river into that original audience? Well, how do you do it? The first one is a commitment to exegesis, like we talked about last week, and to carefully read the text and ask questions. A good exegeter is always asking questions of the text. You need to be a detective of the text, asking it great questions. So there are two kinds of questions we should ask of every passage of the Bible that we come to. The first one is those that relate to context. Where was Philippians written? Who wrote it? What circumstance were the people in that Paul was writing to? When you think of Ezekiel, who wrote Ezekiel? What was the context surrounding its writing? That's the first type of question you need to ask. That is about context. The second one is about content. Those are the words in front of your page. All right, the words in front of your page. Why is it this word and not that word? Interesting that they could have said it this way, but they said it that way. So it's about context. The second is about content. The questions about context are about literary. All right, what kind of a writing is this? All right, so when you read the Song of Solomon or Proverbs, it reads differently than a book like Revelation. So this is the work of exegesis, thinking about its context and its content. So what I want you to do now, the first two processes, becoming a commitment to being a good exegeter, and then asking good questions. What I want you to do is I want you to go to a text like John chapter 15 that we talked about in a few sessions ago, and I want you to do that work. I want you to think about context and content. Do some work there and journal stuff, all right? Ask yourself, write down questions that you have of the text.